So, good afternoon. My name is Lukas Netz. I'm from the chair of software engineering of RWTH-Aachen University, and I will be moderating this session. Before we start, some minor remarks. This session will be recorded. And after the session, there will be time for a Q&A session. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them after this talk. It is an essential concern of software engineering to use as many helpful tools as possible in order to make the development of software even more efficient and to increase the quality of resulting application. That is why it is a pleasure to have Malte Lantin from GitHub, who will give us insights on the topic of using GitHub Copilot for software development. Malte Lantin is an enterprise solutions engineer at GitHub, and he is working with some of GitHub's largest customers, helping them to establish GitHub as their central DevSecOps platform and improving their development experience through AI-powered developer tools. Malte is passionate about improving the software development process and sharing his experience. Before joining GitHub in 2021, he spent more than 10 years at Microsoft, gathering experience as a software program manager, software engineer, and technical evangelist. In his spare time, he is a co-host of one of the most popular software engineering podcasts in Germany. It's called To Do Cast, developer podcast. And we are very happy to have you here today. Malte, the floor is yours.
Cool. Thank you. And thanks for a nice introduction. I'm very happy to be here. It's a pleasure to introduce GitHub Copilot to all of you and collaborating with RWTH University in Aachen. And we had a small chat before the session, and I talked about like my family kind of coming from Aachen and me having spent a lot of time in Aachen in my childhood. It's definitely a pleasure to collaborate on this topic and introduce you to one of the most exciting developments of our times, which is AI-assisted work and AI-assisted software development. And working at GitHub, of course, we are passionate about software engineers and software engineering. In general, we collaborate with some of the largest software organizations on this planet, helping them to gain more efficiency, gain more security into their software platform, and really establishing a platform that they empowers the developers to achieve more. So let me share my slide and start with the introduction of GitHub Copilot. And then later on, we'll also have the chance to see it in action, because I brought a demo for you so that we can look at how working with GitHub Copilot actually looks like. So you should now be able to see my screen. All right. So today, GitHub Copilot is the world's most widely adopted developer tool based on artificial intelligence. So more and more developers start using the tool. So it's really exciting to talk about this and really give you some of the background of why we at GitHub went into building AI-powered developer tools and what we plan to help our developer customers to get out of that tool. So for us, artificial intelligence, it's not just something that you put into just like every piece of software randomly, as it sometimes appears to be happening in the industry. So like there is no day at all where you don't see a new startup or a company announcing that they are introducing artificial intelligence into their product. For us, you always need to think about like, what is the benefit? Where does artificial intelligence really make sense? And for us, one of those areas is developer experience. So GitHub has always been passionate about developers and providing a great developer experience. And we now found that bringing artificial intelligence into the experience for developers, helping them to do their job in a kind of more productive, efficient, and also in a happier way, is actually kind of the next level of developer experience. And studies done by like major consultancies like McKinsey have found that developer experience is essential to bring more happiness, fulfillment, and overall a state of flow for developers. So those are kind of the things that essentially make developers feel more productive. And when you look at the outcomes, which makes developers more productive. And today, artificial intelligence is at the core of it. So let's dive deeper and look into how we at GitHub introduced artificial intelligence into the developer experience. So when you introduce artificial intelligence into the developer experience, it's not about replacing developers. It's not about taking the work that has been done by software engineers in the past, giving it to some like magical artificial intelligence, and then eventually software engineers will become redundant. It's about giving human developers more time to spend on the meaningful aspects of software engineering. And especially in the context kind of the academic research about software engineering, you usually spend a lot of time on the like more like creative parts of software engineering. Like, how do you design good software? How do you collaborate in software engineering? How do you make sure that the software that you're building is secure, fast, and efficient? You don't spend a lot of time in just like the craftsmanship where you just like type code. So this is why like many years ago, people moved away from calling people who build software programmers to calling those people who build software engineers. So it's actually about the engineering effort and these tasks where like really humans shine when they collaborate and are creative on building new innovation. So with artificial intelligence, we feel that we can take a lot of the burden away from software engineers where they need to like write boilerplate code, work on repetitive tasks each and every day. And this is just like a part of everyone's job as a software engineer to like go through this at least every second day and write this piece of code that you have written in the past because it's something that you need in every new application. But why not accelerate this and hand this over to an artificial intelligence that has learned from humans how to implement those default and standard tasks, how to build this boilerplate code? But also, artificial intelligence can help human beings to better understand code, because in the past you had to spend a lot of time to gain like deep proficiency on every technology that you touched. Nowadays, you can gain this proficiency way faster because AI can help you understand code that others have written, but it can also help you understand the code that you might have written a couple of years ago. And this is usually a challenge when you like move into a new product or project where other people have contributed code, or you have started this project some time ago and now you're going back to extend this. So artificial intelligence can also help in that area and can actually help you understand that code and make sure that you can dive into the existing application faster and extend it with new functionality. So when companies and organizations in general start adopting GitHub Copilot, they are actually looking for three different things. They want to increase the software developers' happiness. They want to increase the developers' productivity, and they want to accelerate the overall software development flow. So those are the things that people are trying to get out of this product because of the things that I talked about earlier, taking away some of the burden of like writing boilerplate code, accelerating the development workflow, being able to easily understand existing code, and so on. And we will later on see this in practice, how this actually looks like. So after you've introduced GitHub Copilot, you will see a lot of those gains in real life, and GitHub Copilot has proven to be valuable in that area. So right now, like 1 in 3 Fortune 500 companies in the US are already using GitHub Copilot, and overall like 50,000 businesses decided to adopt GitHub Copilot. And this is just for Copilot business. We also have Copilot individuals, where hundreds of thousands of people are getting access to GitHub Copilot for their personal projects, for academic work, for research, for nonprofit work, for open source development. So more and more individuals and companies are adopting the tool. And just in 1.5 years' time after we launched GitHub Copilot, it has become one of the most popular and one of the most loved software engineering tools on this planet. So when we talk about productivity and efficiency gains, it's not just us talking about this, it's our customers providing that feedback. And we have seen a lot of research going on like in the industry, because companies want to make sure that they get value for the money they pay to GitHub for using GitHub Copilot, but also in the academic space where there's a lot of research going on about like how artificial intelligence can improve software development. And from a study that Accenture did with 450 developers last year, we saw that like developers are just like getting faster when they start using GitHub Copilot because they can stay in the flow longer. And this is an essential part of like the day-to-day work of a software engineer, to really stay focused and being able to develop the functionality that you're tasked with developing without any distraction, without jumping back and forth between tools. It also showed that developers are more productive. So they reported that they are writing better code and that they accept a lot of the suggestions that they get from the AI tool. And also the company found that it's becoming more efficient. Like there are more builds happening, there are more deployments, and eventually developers are more satisfied. And this is a very important part, especially for companies introducing those AI tools, because especially in today's labor market, where there's a very high demand of software engineers, it's really essential to keep developers satisfied and happy in their job so that they stay at the company for a longer period of time, and in order to be able to attract new developers to your company. When we asked developers about a year ago how they perceive working with GitHub Copilot, they told us like there is less mental effort on repetitive tasks, and we will see this in the demo later, that they feel more satisfied in work and that they can stay in the flow longer. And I think this is kind of very hard to just like understand by the numbers. So once you see the tool working and once you try it yourself, you will actually experience this yourself. So how does this actually work? How did we implement GitHub Copilot? So we started with the IDE. So we brought an extension to multiple software development environments: Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, the JetBrains IDEs, NeoVim. And we started developing an AI-powered backend service for that. So what the IDE extension does, it takes the context from your code editor, sends it to our service, which is using an large language model to generate code suggestions that then in almost real time get displayed to the developer. And this is not just like random code that gets generated based on a prompt that you put into a chat interface. This is specifically tailored to your needs, to your application, because it's actually using the context from your code editor. And when people start diving into AI tools, they usually start with a tool like ChatGPT because it's the most popular and common tool. And what people found when using ChatGPT, especially with GPT-4, is that it can generate very good code. But they also see the shortcomings that ChatGPT needs to kind of like be spoon-feeded all of the information that it needs to develop the code that actually works in your application, because usually you don't start from scratch. You start in an existing application. You extend an application over time. So all this context is relevant for a large language model to be able to generate the code that works with your application. And you've probably experienced this even before AI came into play. So when you were looking for a solution for a problem, you needed to like go to an internet search engine, you Googled something, you found like a Stack Overflow post that was kind of like discussing this topic. You would be looking for the most correct or suitable solution. Then you would bring this code to your own application, adjust it to your needs, and somehow make it work. But usually it was just like a generic solution that wasn't really working with your application right away. So you needed to spend a lot of time refactoring this. So with GitHub Copilot and the integration in your code editor, we can actually take the context, the code that you have in your current code file, but also the code in other files that you've opened in your editor, and use this as context for the large language model in order to be able to generate code that is specifically tailored to your application, that works with your application from the beginning. And hopefully we'll be able to see this in the demo a little later. So just a few words about large language models and why GitHub Copilot works so well on generating code for you. So many people are already familiar with the concept of large language models, and it's important to understand that what GitHub Copilot uses is a large language model, and it's not a copy and paste machine. So it's not copy pasting source code that it actually kind of gathered on the internet. So the large language model has been trained on source code and human language on the internet, publicly available sources. And then it's kind of a probability machine. So based on the context that it gets, it proposes words. So it's not deterministic as well. So whenever I start using GitHub Copilot or another large language model, for the same input, I might get the same output, but it's not guaranteed. So there are certain probabilities in play. So whenever you use a tool based on a large language model, especially when developing software, you always need to be aware that there are probabilities in play. So the better the context is built for your specific use case, the better the suggestion will be. And when you don't provide any context and give the same generic prompt, the probability is high that you will get the same result back. And it might even be a result that you might have seen somewhere on the internet, because the large language model has been trained on publicly available information on the internet. So in order to get kind of like specific and individual code suggestions, you need to give it the right input there. So eventually, large language models work great for software engineering because code is essentially text and language. So it's like it's a programming language and it's human language. And it's usually a combination of both. So you have like your description of like your actual application flow in the programming language of your choice. And you have human language that kind of provides additional information as comments that you use as documentation for your application. So it's actually something where large language models are actually very strong, because it's something that you can easily train on, because there is a lot of publicly available source code. And it's actually using this kind of like long chain of tokens or words where you can calculate the probability of the next token very easily. So software engineering is a great area to apply generative AI in general on. So this is also why we see tools like GitHub Copilot being the first tools where people really on larger scale reap the benefits of this current AI wave. So many people got very excited when like things like GPT-3 and now GPT-4 were launched with ChatGPT, and people started using it for day-to-day tasks. People even started using it for academic work and writing some papers. But eventually it's kind of not really working well, because you can easily determine, like, is this actually human written or is this something generated? Like nowadays, I get so many emails and see so many blog posts where you can instantly see kind of someone is using a large language model to generate this. But with source code, it's different because it's so well structured, and software engineers have always built on the best practices of others. So people have always learned from software code that others have written and then produced their own code that is usually very similar, but is adaptable. So you can start using a large language model to generate this code after it has been trained. And it's a very good application of those AI technologies that are currently very rapidly developed, and people really see the value there. So GitHub Copilot is integrated in your editor. and it's coming to the GitHub platform, and we will see this in the demo as well. So just talking a little bit about the features, how you can use GitHub Copilot. First, it's in the IDE with code completion, which auto-completes your code once you start typing. It can convert comments to code. It can suggest tests. It shows you some alternatives if you want to. You also have Copilot Chat, which is kind of like similar to something like ChatGPT, but in the context of your code editor. So it has the awareness of what you're currently working on. It has the awareness of kind of specific files that you want to add as reference. And it can also help you like just easily get explanations, get boilerplate code generated, and it can even help you with debugging and remediating vulnerabilities and bugs. So this is great because it's right there where you as a software engineer work in your IDE, and it's getting kind of all the power and capabilities that a modern large language model like GPT-4 can bring you. Next is Copilot on the CLI. So we recently brought this to the command line interface as well. So on the command line, you can generate CLI commands based on human language, and you can also get explanation about CLI commands. So this is very useful for people who do a lot of scripting, who work on the command line a lot, and also want to make use of the power of large language models right where they work, so they don't have to jump back and forth between different tools. And I think this is a something that is very important to notice here, that everything that we do with GitHub Copilot is something that gets a lot of its value from being integrated into the developer flow. And also compared to other like more generic generative AI tools that might be out there either like for free on the market as open source large language models or as commercial tools that are separate from the development environment or the tools that you're currently using. They don't have all the context that they need to be really meaningful. And also not a lot of research can go into those tools based on the knowledge of how people develop software. Because we as GitHub, we see a lot of software being developed on our platform. We closely collaborate with IDE vendors, for example, Microsoft, who builds development tools and has been developing tools for the last few centuries. So this is why GitHub Copilot provides so much value, because it's so deeply integrated in the tools that you're already using. So before I go into the demo, I want to make sure that everyone is on the same page here about what GitHub Copilot is and what it isn't. So first, GitHub Copilot is something that we call an AI pair programmer. So it helps me as a software engineer to write better code, to write code faster, to get through this like boring boilerplate work faster. It helps me to understand technology easier, to translate between different technologies. It even helps me if I don't have some like peer to work with, to just like brainstorm some ideas. I can ask GitHub Copilot for its opinion on certain concepts that I've developed. So it's a really powerful tool in my toolbox, but it doesn't replace me as a software engineer. So I still need to have this understanding of how to build software in the technology I'm currently working on. And I need to be able to review the code that Copilot suggested. And I still need to have all the tools in place that are currently best practices in software engineering, like your linting tools, your static code security scanning tools, your dependency security tools. So all those tools that have been introduced over the past years as best practices to be able to build high quality and secure software, they are still needed. But GitHub Copilot is helping me to go through my day-to-day work way faster and more efficient and with a higher satisfaction. But on the other side, Copilot isn't a tool that is always right. So it's a large language model-based tool that has been trained on all the like powerful and good source code on the internet, but it has also been trained on some of the nonsense that people put online. So it's kind of like learning from everything and that it's out there, and it's not kind of just trained on a specific piece of code that someone has vetted before. So sometimes GitHub Copilot can come up with nonsense, and you might have seen like similar things happening when you use other large language-based tools like ChatGPT, that you can't always trust it. And sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's just like guiding you into the wrong direction, and you need to kind of counter steer there and make sure that it's moving back on track. So you need to be in control there. And it doesn't know everything. And something to keep in mind is that those large language models need to be trained and retrained on a regular basis. And it's this requires like so much compute, so much like GPUs being used to train these large language models on billions of lines of code. This doesn't happen every few weeks or every few months. This happens like once in a while, as those large language model like companies that build those, or like the communities that power those, when they retrain the model and publish a new version, it will gain awareness of what happened between now and when the model was trained before. So right now, GitHub Copilot is using a large language model that was trained by OpenAI up until the end of 2021. So GitHub Copilot doesn't know everything that happened after that. So this is something that you need to bring as context into the tool if you need more recent information. And eventually, it's not a replacement for your own skills. So we still need very good software engineers to build very good software. So it's not replacing senior developers, and it's not replacing junior developers, because eventually we will always need the human in the loop to make sure that the quality is right. So it brings different benefits to different types of developer, depending on the experience that you have, depending on the tools that you've been using in the past. But it's definitely something that many developers love. So let's dive into the demo and see it in action. So I brought a GitHub code space, which timed out now while I was presenting. So let me refresh this window. So this is basically a Visual Studio Code running in the browser, being connected to a container in the backend. So it gives me a development environment that is already prepared for me that I can use from the browser. So as the container has been frozen to save some CPU cycle, it takes a little bit for me to refresh this, but once the code space is loaded, we can jump right into the demo. So the application that I'm using for my demo is a Node.js application. It's a backend for a small bookstore. So it provides information about books in JSON format. So it has a few API REST endpoints as a REST interface. So we can look into like the API.js. So we have one endpoint implemented here. So this is like a very simple Node application. And now I'm the developer who has a few tasks to complete. So let me go back to the README and look at the tasks that we need to work on. So first of all, let's look at this rendered markdown here. So first of all, we need to complete the Docker file to build the application container. So we want to run this application in a Docker container. So we need a Docker file to have the container ready to run the app. Then I need to provide the right YAML workflow for GitHub Actions to have my CI/CD in place. So I want to build my application. I want to test my application. Then there are a few features that need to be implemented. For example, the ability to search for books in the database that is being used, and the ability to search for books by title. So we have two search functionalities. So searching for books by author and then by title. Also, this application allows me to switch between an in-memory database and a Postgres database, so two database options available here, depending on whether I want to debug locally just on the JSON files here or on the actual Postgres database. So now when I run this application, I can run it on the terminal. Let's look at this. So I'll get the endpoint here. So my bookstore backend is running. I can now do, yes, it's books, and I get back like the 2 books that have been inserted here as test data. All right, so let's start diving into my task that I have to complete, and GitHub Copilot will help me with that. And I can kind of talk about what's the best way to use GitHub Copilot, when should you use code completion, when you should use Copilot chat. So let's first look at the Docker file. So my colleagues already left a short description as a comment here to explain what is supposed to be implemented. So when you start from an empty file, GitHub Copilot doesn't have any context about what you're planning to do. So it's always a good practice to add some comments with more context to instruct the large language model and guide it into the right direction. So I could just now go here and start implementing this, and GitHub Copilot will suggest like lines of code line by line based on the context. So GitHub Copilot has seen like the context in this file and is now generating source code suggestions for me. Of course, I can also kind of implement this as I go. So if I just go here and do something like from, GitHub Copilot will help me also by just going line by line as I type. So it's kind of augmenting the work that I do as a software engineer. What I can also do with GitHub Copilot code completion is I can open this side pane, I can press Control Return, and GitHub Copilot will look at the context and will generate larger pieces of code that I can then review. And I get like certain alternatives here and then accept. This is very useful, especially if you're kind of like working on a task, you're typing and you're getting auto completion. But now we are here in a situation where we don't have any existing code and we want to start from scratch. So this is a perfect situation where we can make a lot of use of Copilot chat because it helps us to provide more context in the prompt. So I'm opening Copilot chat here as a side pane, and I can now ask GitHub Copilot, can you help me implement the Docker file based on the information in, and then I can provide more context. I could just like rely on the open file, or I can be more specific. So I could do something like file and then reference a specific file. When I send this to GitHub Copilot, it looks at the files that are referenced and it's starting to compile an answer for me. The great thing with GitHub Copilot chat is that it's not just like preparing the source code for you, it's also giving you some context. And then you can iterate as well. So you can just go here and say like, give me the code without all the comments. Then GitHub Copilot will take the rest of the chat as additional context, and it will regenerate the code that it has generated before based on my input. So this is important best practice, and many of you might have done the same with tools like ChatGPT. Always iterate, make sure that you provide the right context. Now with GitHub Copilot, you can provide the context from your source code files, from what you put into the prompt, and then you can just go here and insert this code. Same as with tools like ChatGPT, you can also use your input, your prompt to give more information. You could, for example, say something like, hey, GitHub Copilot, you're an expert in writing Docker files and you have a lot of experience in this technology. Like, based on your experience, what do you recommend that I improve on this file? And the funny thing is that you can even kind of do this based on the source code that GitHub Copilot already suggested. So if you want to iterate on that, you can either highlight this and ask questions, or you can just do this in the chat. Is there something I could improve in this Docker file to make it faster. So whatever you want to do, you can ask GitHub Copilot to look into a specific direction, and then GitHub Copilot can help you improve your own code, but also improve the initial suggestion that you got from the code. So let's leave it with that for now. So we've got the Docker file here, and it's actually following our instructions that we have in the command. It's using Node 18 and like Alpine Linux here. That looks pretty good for now. So let's move to the next task that we have, and that is building the GitHub Action workflow. And as the GitHub Action workflow is like a longer file, and right now there isn't a lot of information here, it's definitely also useful to do this with a Copilot chat. So let's go here and provide some additional context. So imagine we have a self-hosted runner, or we have a GitHub hosted runner, and we want to specify a specific runner type. So we have a self-hosted on-premises GitHub Action runner called self-hosted. Let's run the workflow there and make sure to use the instructions from this file to build the workflow. So now GitHub Copilot first starts with some generic description, some pseudocode here for me, and then it starts generating the GitHub Action workflow file. So now we might want to change this, and now change this to use GitHub hosted runners based on the latest Linux version available. And then GitHub Copilot can look at the code that it suggested initially and suggest a new piece of code, and then we can move this here. And now it's using the syntax that GitHub is using to reference a GitHub hosted runner based on Linux, because they are all Ubuntu runners. So it's Ubuntu latest. So now let's check whether it has taken into account that we want to do 2 builds. So we use a Node 16 build and a Node 18 build, but that's not quite right. So let's continue iterating on this. Please make sure to use matrix build to accelerate the workflow. So this is where what I mentioned earlier comes into play. So of course you can just like ask GitHub Copilot for an implementation and then kind of like ask for improvement, but without the knowledge of the technology, you might sometimes not get the perfect solution. So let's take this. So now it has reworked this using a matrix build. So I guess this is way more efficient because we can run both builds on both node versions in parallel. So that's nice. So we now got our GitHub Action workflow prepared to do the CI for our app and run all the tests on GitHub Actions. Okay, perfect. So let's continue. And just as a side note, like because there might be people in this call who have been like reviewing all the code that Copilot has suggested, I'm currently not trying to make sure that it's writing like perfect code, and it might not even be 100% correct because we don't have the time to debug all the code. So you might find some errors there or mistake that Copilot has done that I missed in the demo, but I'm completely aware that this sometimes happens. So let's continue with the next task. So implement the ability to search for books on the Postgres database. So maybe let's do this the other way around. Let's not just go here in the database, Postgres, and then add this method here. Of course, I could just like go here and someone already left a comment here. I can go to the next line. GitHub Copilot will look at the comment. It will look at the other code and then just like come back with the implementation. But now I want to do it the other way around, maybe just to try something different here. So let's go to the API. And here we see that there is the book search for the author is already implemented. And now we can go and implement the search functionality for the title. So let's accept this. And now we go into the Postgres here. And now let's see whether GitHub Copilot Chat can actually reach beyond this one file and gather more context from the project in order to help me complete this file. So let's start a new chat here. And now I'm using something that's called at Workspace. So at Workspace, it's using a locally provided index of my code to do retrieval augmented generation. So it's actually building a database of my code, and then it's ingesting after a search the information from the search back into the prompt for the large language model so that it gains awareness about other files that I might not have open in my editor right now. So let's see what methods are missing right here. Please add the missing functions to the Postgres. So now, if you put this into something like ChatGPT, it would be completely lost because it doesn't have any context of like, what is Malte even talking about? Like, what file is he referencing to? What application is he currently working on? So now GitHub Copilot can look at my full project and then kind of suggest some of the methods that might be missing in this database file. So it's suggesting that I add some more methods like creating a book, deleting a book. That makes sense, but that's not what I want to do right now. So please take file API JSON into consideration when suggesting the missing functions. So now it's looking at the API.json, looking at what REST endpoints we have, and it's then suggesting that we are now implementing get books by author and get books by title. Okay, let's do this and take this piece of code here and move this over here. So now we have this done. So this looks okay, but maybe we can also change this a little bit. Make sure the code in selection, so we can even look at specific code that we selected, allows searching for parts of the author name or title. So now GitHub Copilot is suggesting to use the like operator in the SQL statement here using wildcard. So let's replace it with that. Okay, a little bit of reformatting here. All right, so let's save this for now. So now we still need to make those changes to the other file, and there is the in-memory database here. So in the in-memory database, we have the get books by author. And let's add the missing method here. And as I just go to the next line, GitHub Copilot uses the context from the other files that I have open in my editor to suggest the next line of code. So it knows that in the other file, I'm referencing this get books by title method. So let's go to the next line here and see what GitHub Copilot can help me with. And it's actually using the same kind of implementation that we have used on the Postgres as well. So now that we have this added, so maybe go to the testing here. So let's go back here and ask GitHub Copilot what's missing there. So what we can do with GitHub Copilot Chat is also use something that we call / commands, which are kind of shortcuts that help us kind of start a new project, fix a bug, get an explanation, or generate some tests. So let's try this here. So we are not providing any more context here. So this is pretty much gibberish. Oh, that's exciting. Let's try this again. So let's get these tests, get the tests that are missing based on the in memory. Okay, so I guess this test thing doesn't work today, which is interesting. So let's do it differently. Generate the missing tests based on file in memory. Seems someone has broken the pre-built prompt in the test shortcut, which is a little unfortunate for the demo. But let's take this suggestion for now. Now that we have added this, this looks good. Now we have a few tests here. All right. So let's now go back and see whether we completed all the tasks. Like we've added the search for books. We've added the search by title, which is good. So let's stop this and run this again. And let's see whether we can now search for the books. So let's see which books we have in the database. So this is the Postgres database. So let's search for a specific book and see whether this title and this works. That's nice. So let's see whether we can search for the author as well. This also seems to work. So let's try another thing. So we also implemented this for the in-memory database. So how do we switch to the in-memory database? We need to set this environment variable to true. Let's imagine we don't know how to do this. So let's go back here and ask GitHub Copilot. So let's pick this. In order to use the in-memory database, I need to set in-memory database the environment variable to true. How can I do this? And this is also something very helpful. So you don't even have to just use GitHub Copilot for code only, but it also works for like terminal commands. So let's stop this. And then it even says like insert to terminal. Let's do this here. then export this, and now we should be able to use the in-memory database. It's inserting a few other books here. That looks nice. Let's go here. See, okay, we have this Hobbit book. Let's see whether the Scrum book doesn't exist. That's correct. The Hobbit book exists. Let's see whether we can also search for the author. That also seems to work. We get back 2 books. All right, so I believe we completed everything that we had to do. So we built the Docker file, we built the GitHub Action workflow, we implemented our new REST endpoints, including like the implementation of the function in the in-memory and Postgres database. Just from first view, code seems to work. We have used GitHub Copilot to generate some terminal commands for us. And the great thing is that you can even use it like the other way around. So whenever there is a problem on your terminal, maybe if I do something like npm run, I get back this message here. I can highlight this and say like Copilot explain this. And it automatically references the terminal, uses the explain command and the terminal selection. And then it gives me some information about what is this actually about. So it works both ways. So something that I haven't used, so I just want to do this to complete the demo. So let's go back to the Postgres here. And I can highlight this code, and then I can press Command I to start an inline chat. And then I can ask questions like explain, and it will move this to the general chat pane, and I will get an explanation about what's happening in this method. But what I can also do is I can, if I find a problem in this code, and let's maybe let's introduce a problem to this code. So let's not do it that way, but rather go here and do something like this, which you probably shouldn't do. Or then check this and do something like fix. Okay, I didn't reference the right piece of code here, so let's ask for this on the chat here. So let's go for this and do Copilot. Explain this. And let's see whether you can improve this. Can you improve this code? Stop. And now it's telling me that the implementation that I have chosen might be vulnerable to SQL injection attacks. So it's proposing a different solution that is using parameters. So similar to what it was before I changed the code. So let's wrap up the demo here and go back to the slides and kind of do a little bit of an outlook. So we now looked at Copilot in my code editor. We've used Copilot chat. We've used Copilot code completion. We've seen the different capabilities here. But eventually, developers only spend like about a quarter of their time, and this is what we see from like our customers and our own work at GitHub, is developers only spend a quarter of their time actually coding. So 75% of the time that developers spend at work is non-coding related. So how can we use GitHub Copilot and AI to accelerate other tasks that developers are working on as well? So this leads us to our evolution with GitHub Copilot. So first of all, we want to make sure that developers can more easily discover code, understand code, and get explanation about code. We need to be able to grasp a broader context to understand existing application and make sure that GitHub Copilot gains awareness of the repositories and the knowledge in our organization. So this is where Copilot Enterprise comes into play, which is our extension of GitHub Copilot, moving out of the code editor into github.com. So first of all, we'll get Copilot chat integrated into github.com, and we'll just look at this in a couple of minutes. And this allows us to personalize Copilot responses, not only based on the context that is currently available in the code editor through like code files that you reference or code files that you've opened, but also make it based on the source code that is in the repository or in other repositories in your organization. So in the future, it will also have the full context of all kind of like GitHub issues, pull requests, and other files that you store on GitHub. And you will also be able to use the knowledge from open source projects as you develop. We are also giving you the capability to easily search through the chat if you're accessing kind of stuff on GitHub, open source projects, your own source code. You can get summaries based on best practices, and you can access knowledge bases that you compile yourself. And something that we recently added is internet access. This is kind of requested by a lot of developers because it kind of fills this gap between the regular training of AI models and the technology field moving very fast. So when you use GitHub Copilot, you will know, and I mentioned this, will realize, and I mentioned this earlier, that GitHub Copilot might not be aware of the latest library version of the latest technology that was just released half a year ago. With internet access, GitHub Copilot can search the internet and use this context as additional information to provide you with some additional, like more up-to-date context. Also, GitHub Copilot can help you with pull requests. It can help you write descriptions for pull requests, and it can also help reviewers better understand the changes that others have made, and even suggest some improvements to the changes that others are making to your source code. So why not have another peer reviewing your source code while your colleagues might not be available? So let's look at this just for a couple of more minutes, and I have this open here. So this is a different repository. This is a complete bookstore, including front-end and back-end, but this one is written in Java. And now let's ask GitHub Copilot with the chat on github.com. We can ask it a few questions. So for example, like one of the tasks that I have here is add a rating feature to the bookstore. And I probably need to add some search functionality as well. So let's ask GitHub Copilot, where should I add code for the rating feature I am working on? Typo. So if you ask that question to ChatGPT or in your editor without the broader context, GitHub Copilot wouldn't know a lot about your project. But now I can definitely go here and add more context. So this is still kind of the answer that you would also expect in your local editor. But let's imagine we use this in the context of our application. So I can go here and ask it questions about like specific information. So I can add a knowledge base here, or I can add like references to existing information. So I can add certain files. I can even reference like specific pieces of code. So let's imagine we need to implement a search function. So where is the code for the search function in this app? So GitHub Copilot is now using its knowledge, the context from this already indexed repository to look for files that might be relevant for me to touch when I start implementing the search function. So there are just a few files that I should look at, and it's conveniently adding references here. So I can just like go here and go to the book service.java, and it will point me to the right piece of code here where I need to look at if I want to implement this search functionality. And you can see that there is the book search by title here. So let's try something different on this application and start a new chat here. And what is the latest Java version I can upgrade to? So it's actually this time not just looking at my repository, it's doing an internet search. So it realized that when I ask about the latest Java version, it should look on the internet and find out what the latest Java version is, and then it can provide me with the right piece of information that I need. So this is kind of like contextualized for my repository, but also giving me information from the internet. If I now want to add further knowledge, I can do this through knowledge bases. I can extend this by indexing other repositories in my organization. And in the future, we will also bring the capability of training and fine-tuning custom models for a specific use case or a specific organization. So this is just giving you a feel of where we are moving with GitHub Copilot, not just talking about writing code, helping developers be more efficient in writing code, but also moving into other areas of software engineering where you would do research, would do code reviews of your colleagues' code. And these are all areas where AI can, in the future, help you be faster and be more efficient. So how is GitHub Copilot built? As you are probably aware, GitHub is a subsidiary of Microsoft, and Microsoft is a stakeholder or shareholder in OpenAI. So GitHub Copilot is using the power of all of those three companies. So GitHub is providing all the knowledge about how to develop software, what the tools are that software engineers need. GitHub is working with Microsoft to get access to the large-scale global infrastructure of Microsoft Azure to build the backend for GitHub Copilot. And OpenAI is contributing the AI models that are hosted on Azure in an isolated fashion for GitHub to be able to power a large-scale AI-powered tool like GitHub Copilot. So GitHub Copilot kind of sits at the intersection of the technologies that all of those three companies bring into play here. So it's definitely something that is very hard to build at that scale and can only be built if you have the power of all of those areas of technologies that the three companies are bringing together here. So eventually, GitHub Copilot is a tool that developers can build on. So it's also essential that we focus on safety, trust, and reliability. So this is also why we make sure that we honor the privacy of the source code that people put into GitHub Copilot, because in order for GitHub Copilot to generate code, you need to send context to the AI service. So this is why we are making sure that when you use Copilot Business, we never retain any of the source code that is being used as context, and we never retain any of the feedback that GitHub Copilot generates for you, as long as you're using the IDE-based tools, Copilot Chat and Code Completion. For the chat on github.com, it's a little different because, of course, we already know all your source code because they are already the source code is already available on github.com. And also, as it's a web-based chat, we need to do a little bit of session management to allow you to navigate the website while keeping the chat available. So this one has a little bit different privacy terms that you need to check if you're using Copilot Enterprise. But for Copilot Business in the IDE, we never retain any of your source code other for generating the source code suggestion. Also security, we make sure that all of the data transmission is end-to-end encrypted, hosted in a secure Azure environment. And in terms of copyright, we make sure that we help you respecting intellectual property rights. This is where the Microsoft copyright commitment comes into play. So we have an option in GitHub Copilot to block source code suggestions that match publicly available code, because as always with probabilities, there is a little chance that the AI model comes up with source code that is similar or identical to source code that someone else has implemented. This is definitely something that can happen if you are writing very basic boilerplate code. For example, you start in an empty file and ask GitHub Copilot to help you implement a certain algorithm that thousands of people have already developed as part of an assignment at their school or university and put their source code on github.com. This is where GitHub Copilot got its knowledge from. So it will definitely implement something that is based on those best practices. So we are implementing that filter that filters out source code suggestions that match publicly available code on github.com, so that the risk of you accidentally infringing some potential copyrights is reduced. And if you have this setting enabled and are still accused of violating any copyrights, Microsoft will protect you on the legal side and help you go through any of the legal litigations that might come up there. So GitHub Copilot is definitely building on those three pillars here and helping you to build on the power of AI while making sure that you're always on the safe side here. So this takes me to the end of the presentation and demo. I hope this was interesting. I tried to kind of like do the end-to-end story, give you a better understanding of what GitHub Copilot is and what it isn't, the technology behind GitHub Copilot, and then also in the demo, show you like how GitHub Copilot works in real life, how you can use it to build software. And as you've seen, you can use it for like complex pieces of software, but you can also use it for very simple tasks like getting suggestions for like terminal commands, for writing, for example, Python scripts, for doing other scripting that you might need in your day-to-day job. So it's very versatile, and it definitely helps getting the context from your editor, because it makes sure that the source code suggestions that you get are tailored to your specific application and needs.